I think we are now live, Mr. Town Clerk, is that right?
Just becoming live at this moment in time, sir.
Right.
I believe that we are now live. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, hello everybody. I'm going to read the preamble that we decided that we should use because we've got this relatively new Zoom streaming ability. So bear with me and let's just do this properly. I'm Councillor Andy Hutton. I'm the chairman of the Budget and Policy Committee, and I'll now ask members to indicate by a physical show of hands that they can hear proceedings. Can everybody hear, please? Okay, thank you. I'd like to take a roll call of committee members who are voting present, please. I've got Councillor Williamson is not here yet. Councillor Ward is here. Councillor Crawford is here. Councillor Ewing is here. Councillor Councillor Johnson is here, and Councillor Smith is here. Thank you. Any other members are here that are not actually on the business committee? Is Councillor Allen. Okay. Councillors and officers are asked to ensure they've included their name against their thumbnail video, which everybody has. And in accordance with normal practice on each matter that falls to be considered by the committee, I shall give opportunity for councillors on the committee to speak first before giving ward members an opportunity to speak. Members who wish to speak can either use the Zoom raise hand or they can raise a hand and just make sure they attract my attention. Again, can we ask that the committee members raise their hands first, and then we'll see if anybody else wishes to speak. The quorum for this meeting is 3, which we've obviously got. May I remind councillors and the public the documents for this meeting are available on the council website. And please note that all members are not allowed to use the share document facility at all in this meeting. In addition, may I remind you that we will stay muted until called to speak and remute once you've spoken. When I call you to speak, I'll ask everybody to speak. I'll give them their name. And in the interest of transparency, try not to use the comments facility at all to communicate between yourselves during the meeting. Any talking please through me. Voting will either be by assent of the members or the committee or by a roll call vote. And if we have a roll call, members will be asked to vote either for, against, or abstain when asked. If a councillor wishes to declare an interest, they'll be temporarily removed from the meeting until the matter is resolved, and then they'll be readmitted. And when the public part of the meeting is over, then we will all adjourn for 10 minutes, and then that gives us time to log back in to the confidential part of the meeting. Okay, so welcome to this meeting. First of all, apologies for absence, please, Town Clerk.
Thank you, Chairman. We have no apologies for absence.
Thank you very much. Confirmation of the minutes for the last meeting, which was held on the 2nd of June. Any points of clarification or points that are wrong, or is everybody happy? Anybody, any comments, or is somebody prepared to propose that we move them?
I think Councillor Ewing
is indicating she will. Anybody else second them, please? Councillor Johnson, thank you very much. So I'll sign those at an appropriate time. All right. Declarations of interest. If you remember that if you want to say a declaration, say it now, or if you discover something through the meeting that you want to declare an interest, you must do so straight away. I've just found a few more councillors have appeared, which I hadn't seen earlier, so sorry if I didn't say hello to you earlier, particularly Paul Williamson, who we couldn't find. Sorry, Paul. Right.
Sorry, I was struggling to find the login, then I found it and it was gone 5, so
right, good.
I'm late.
Right, welcome to everybody. Items for recommendation to council. Corporate service plan. To consider the draft 2020-21 corporate service plan an organisational risk register. So can I give this over to the town clerk, please?
Thank you, Chairman. I guess really by way of introduction, the service plan has been revisited in light of the coronavirus pandemic, and as you'll appreciate, the impact on our business has been major. There are a couple of things I'd particularly like to draw members' attention to. In the first instance, the financial situation, which will feed through this meeting and is going to then be a major matter for consideration, both for members and for officers as we go through the rest of the year. As you're aware, government has introduced substantial assistance to businesses and the private sector in the form of grants, loans, rate reliefs, and a range of schemes. Those schemes are not available to the town council. In addition, because we are geared as an organisation and typically generate approximately £2 worth of every £3 of income from commercial activities, and lockdown meant that those commercial activities themselves were closed down alongside recognition of the difficulties encountered by tenants, where we offered 2 quarters of deferred rent till next year, and of course the pannier market being closed. As you can imagine, we are effectively in a situation where we are not generating on a month-by-month basis 2 out of every £3 that we would have originally anticipated that we were going to have. As you're aware, we're at the back end of a major capital investment programme. That means that our capital reserves themselves are all committed. And because of the loss of income that we have and that we project to have, it means that we are having to now access the general reserve, which is the money which is put aside and held for an emergency situation. We're also having to access some of the reserves which we're contractually bound to have under agreements with partners, such as those in relation to the Guildhall and the Townscape Heritage Initiative premises that we agreed with the National Lottery Heritage Fund that we would set aside. What that means in practice is that in addition to your capital reserves being committed, your earmarked reserves, which were earmarked for other activities, are now committed, and your general reserve, which if you think of as an emergency fund itself, is committed. Now, if we were in the private sector, or if we were an individual in a situation like this, you would probably seek to borrow in order to get oneself over the short-term difficulty. That is something which under current legislation, councils are not allowed to do. They can only borrow for capital purposes, not to support revenue streams. Equally, if you were in the private sector, if you couldn't borrow, you would look to dispose of an asset and realise its value and then deploy that to support your revenue streams. Again, that is not something which the council is legally permitted to do. That means that the only way currently, unless government changes any of those areas of legislation, and there is canvassing which is taking place with government to see if they can look at those areas, the only way in which we can actually generate income is from the residual income streams we have, which are going to be very largely dependent upon the extent to which the retail businesses and the market businesses are able to reopen and to prosper. Secondly, through savings or cuts and reductions in services. As you know, we're running, I think, with approximately 6 members of staff short at the moment, so that does represent a saving, although it is also an additional pressure which is placed upon remaining staff, but it is one of the ways we have of saving money. Managers are also in the process of being tasked with looking across the board at their service areas for areas where savings and cuts can be made in order to support the council through the rest of this financial year. And we will bring those back to members. And I think at that stage, there will be a more detailed consideration which is going to need to be required in terms of what we do and how on a very much more detailed basis than you would normally do, really, in order to understand how long we can cope on a financial level and at what point the money does or does not run out. As you'll be aware, we do receive our half-yearly payment of Precept in September. So we will have that coming through, which is a major item of income for us, but it is still dwarfed by the loss of income that we have in relation to the commercial side. In relation to the Public Works Loan Board, money, the £400,000 there, that is money we'll come on to later, but that is available to the council, so there isn't an issue in terms of drawing that down. The only thing I think I would add to that is, in the context of what I've said about both the general reserve and the earmarked reserves. Now, the general reserve is in the order of £400,000, and the earmarked reserves specifically, which are set aside for HLF type projects, is in the order of about £150,000 at the moment. Those are essential reserves. So if we are allocating those this year and they are expended this year, then in order to meet compliance either with our contractual obligations with HLF or indeed to pass the requirements of external audit, they need to be either back in place at the beginning of the new financial year, or there needs to be a very credible plan for them to be back in place during the next financial year. So it's really just a flag that we do have a major challenge on that side of things, just to get ourselves back to a level where, from an audit perspective, we would be able to demonstrate a resilient and robust approach to our finances. Finally, Chairman, I would just draw members to the three sections of the report that you have before you. I think the first one is to really just flag to you the position in relation to projects. Clearly there are impacts, and it's a matter for members as to which projects we do or don't proceed with, but we have had to identify in relation to both the challenges and the projects we have that there is going to be an impact, and there is a likelihood some will not proceed or will not be able to proceed in the way in which they were originally envisaged, and that's clearly a matter for members' consideration. I think I would say in relation to the performance indicators you have before you, because of the organisational stress that we're under, it's very hard to be robust about those figures, but I believe that they are genuinely indicative of where we are, but I don't think they're to be relied upon as being a faithful and wholly accurate representation, but I think they indicate where we are. And finally, I think most significantly perhaps in relation to the risk register. Now, members who've been on the council for some time will be aware that, generally speaking, we would consider 12 to be the scoring of risk that we as an organisation would conceivably be comfortable with running with, where we actually do have a significant or a major risk. You may have a different view in relation to the scoring, and I completely understand that, and it's your risk register, it's not the officer's risk register. But certainly from the point of view of the officer's scoring, we have come up with scores where we have one risk which is at 20 out of 25, which is a massive risk, and that's after mitigation, not before mitigation, 3 at 16 and 2 at 12. Now, even if some of our scoring in your opinion is high, I think what it does show is that we are running with an exceptional and an unprecedented level of risk by virtue of the COVID-19 crisis. So those are the points that I would draw to your attention. I'm happy to address any points as best I can arising from the report, but it's with you today really to flag the challenges that we face, and I think to draw attention to the fact that this meeting probably represents the beginning of a process whereby we will be going into much more detail over the coming months with regard to the finances and the operations of the council. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. The Mayor and I thought yesterday, when we talked to Carl, that it was very important that straight at the beginning of this meeting, we just let people know the financial position we're in. It's difficult. It doesn't mean it's dire, but it's difficult. So thank you for that. Right, Councillor Johnson. And you're still muted.
Okay. One of the things that I've noticed in the last week, communication from NALC, was that the government is of the opinion that it's given the councils money to ease them through these difficult times. But when it comes to it, they've given money to county councils and district and borough councils, but absolutely nothing for towns and parishes. And one of the things that NALC suggested was that that the towns and parishes should write to their district councils and ask for some help. I think it's highly unlikely we'll get anything, but I do think that we need to raise awareness of this situation. The government seriously thinks that the county council and the district councils will be passing money down through to the towns and parishes to help them out. I don't think the cash-strapped county council and the cash-strapped borough council have got a penny to pass on to towns and parishes. But I do think, and I'd like to propose, that we write to the borough council and tell them what a perilous situation we're in and actually ask them for some help.
Seems very sensible. Councillor Harry Smith, please.
Yeah, I certainly second that. It's very clear, like Councillor Johnson has just said, that the government doesn't recognise our tier of local government, although in actual fact we are closest to the people of all of them. And so I would certainly second that. With regard to the document, I think that what the town clerk or to the officers have produced is a really good document. I would only make a small correction or ask for a small correction. That is on risk C7, which is on page 32. At the explanation for 26, you have said that the severity is increased to 4, but in actual fact, in the actual column, it's only at 3. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Did Councillor Ewing want to speak, and then Councillor Parker?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I've got two, I suppose, technical questions. Did we used to have to keep, and I think it went from 6 months to 3 months, reserves as working reserves, if all should go wrong? Do we still need to keep that, Mr. Clark? And when you're saying that we have got 400,000 that we could draw down from the Public Works Loan Board, can that be used to cover debt, or would we use it for money that would go towards a project that we didn't have enough capital for within our accounts? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ewings. To deal with your last question first, the Public Works Loan Board money is specifically dedicated to the Guildhall project, so it's only capable of being used for the capital works in connection with that. There is, on the other point, which is about the level of general reserve, there is a level of flexibility which is adopted in relation to that. I think typically auditors tend to look to in the order of three to 6 months running expenses. We're a slightly unusual council, so we have at different times held different amounts. My recollection is that we have, in the time I've been with the council, twice visited the amount. We have reduced it, but we did fortunately still keep it at a figure of in the order of £400,000. I can't remember whether that was 4 months running costs that we assessed at the time. I'm not sure on that, but we still have a level of reserve which in normal circumstances would be considered to be prudent, if not robust. I think the difficulty is that we find ourselves in absolutely abnormal circumstances. If you look at the sort of scenarios that we would have had that reserve for, it would have been for if there had been a major fire, that sort of impact on income streams. Most of those impacts are actually insured risks. It just so happens that we find ourselves in a situation where we have a massive impact and it's not an insured risk and probably wasn't capable of being insured. And therefore, that's why it is such a difficult situation right now.
Thank you. Councillor Graham Parker, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, you've largely, that answer on reserves addresses my question. It was one of the big issues when I was a West Devon councillor, was what was a prudent level of reserve to be keeping. And I have to say, over the years, it seemed to vary from year to year. But yeah, thanks for giving us that information, Carla. That's what I was going to ask. But following on from Anne's point, at the last DALC meeting, the last county meeting, we touched on this. And actually, a lot of the parish councils that rely pretty well totally on precept aren't in the same situation that councils like us that rely very much on commercial rents to keep our precepts down are in. So I think we're in a very special group of councils that are particularly badly done to by the system. I absolutely support the Mayor's suggestion.
Good. So are we in agreement then that we write a letter from our committee, or do we write from our committee, or do we wait till the council and write it from the council to West Devon and the county, explaining our position and asking for help?
It would come from the council from a recommendation from the committee,
Right.
sir.
So can we have a proposal from the Mayor that we do that, and that was seconded by Councillor Harry Smith? Are we all in favour? Anybody against? No, so that'll be carried. Okay, thank you. So the corporate service plan, any more discussion wanted on that, or is that a recommendation to go with the risk register to council? Okay, should we move that forward? Everybody in favour of taking it to council? Please show. That's fine. So, okay, thank you. Right, capital finance to consider the report of the town clerk in connection with the above. Back over to the town clerk, please.
Thank you, Chairman. This really follows on from the service plan. It was done with a view to trying to establish the sustainability of the position in relation to the capital commitments that the council has. The next piece of work is going to be looking at the revenue commitment side of things, which I alluded to earlier. I think what we can say from this is that provided we are able to deliver the commitments to the budget that was originally set for them, that they are secure, but we do absolutely have a need to sit within the budgets that were set for them. And I am conscious of the challenges that COVID-19 has presented, not least with the lockdown, then the 2 metre social distancing, and now 1 metre social distancing. We're looking at, I think this Friday, if not, and to share then shortly afterwards, the actual sort of revised programmes based on 1 metre social distancing for the Public Realm project and the Guildhall project. So I think at this stage, it's very much to say your capital projects are funded. It is vital, however, that we do deliver them as promptly as we possibly can, because as you will appreciate, the cash flow deficit that we have in revenue is something which is only going to get worse as time goes on. And as we move into the autumn and from the autumn into the winter, unless our revenue income streams reconstitute themselves, that's when we're really going to be suffering financially. Other than that, I'm happy to try and pick up on any points that members may have.
Thank you. Any questions, comments, please? Councillor Harry Smith, please.
Yeah, thank you to the town clerk for the report. I think the most obvious thing that one can take from this report is the extent to which a set of accounts reflecting a stated point in time can give a false sense of security. Clearly, we face a situation which is of grave proportion, and we need to react accordingly. We have to recognise, I think, according to the report, that even in the term general reserves does not mean that money is available to support our spending. As we are aware from the report, about 216,000 is, in our case, not available to support that. The rolling capital programme agreed by council was always, to say the least, ambitious, and as you can see from the report, is having a significant impact going forward. The Guildhall project, which I do know quite a bit about, is a substantial part of the council's spending. And as your representative, I've always maintained that the budget is adhered to. And that has caused some soul searching throughout the project, and particularly lately, as the project has progressed. It's worth recalling that what is now the budget figure is substantially greater than that original allowance, as that again is reflected in the report. whilst we must bear in mind that the difference between capital project reserves, asset renewal reserves, and other earmark reserves, they all need to be set aside from revenue. That's the one common call on them. So when you say to people outside, we're struggling with revenue, or to them, money, I think the response, what responses do you get? The first is always, or lately, has been to me, why don't you borrow like Boris and don't worry about paying it back as he doesn't? That's a clear response to what's going on nationally. And then the next suggestion is to sell something. Now that all sounds great, but of course you're not able to fund anything, any revenue spending from either of those. It's also been put to me that a way forward would be to solve the crisis would be to discontinue the presence of the council direct workforce. Many people have a view on what they do or what they don't do. And my argument is always that apart from having a debate around the subject previously, I know from experience of working in a contract-led council environment that it might look like a way of making savings, but I can certainly assure you that the expenditures on controlling multiple contracts is bound to be significant. As a council, we have agreed a determination to have in place a general reserve of 450,000, which in the report indicates that contributes to a target balance of a little over 990,000. Obviously, we will not be in a position to meet that target for some time, and managing a no reserve scenario requires quite a lot of controls. According to various surveys, both locally and nationally, there would appear to be two potential trigger points which could reflect on our income. September being the end of the summer upturn, which they think they're going to have, and March next year when loans that businesses have received start to be paid back, and there seems to be a feeling that there's going to be a problem then. The proposed way forward, if we need to be sure that we're catering for the increased risk. So we turn to the two recommendations in the report. I believe we've got to agree to note the current situation, that's all we can do, and receive further reports to inform financial planning. Review and plan is the prudent way forward. There's obviously an expense in commissioning our accountant to provide ongoing reviews, but I would not want to attempt to steer the council with regard to a way forward without such an input. Mr. Chairman, I support both recommendations and hope that the committee will agree to them as the way forward. Thank you.
Thank you. That was very nicely put. Do we have any more comments or a seconder, please? Councillor Johnson, please, then Councillor Crawford.
Thank you. I'd like to second that proposal from Councillor Harry Smith. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Crawford, would you like to speak?
No, I wanted to second it as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, no more comments. All those in favour then of taking that forward to council. Thank you very much. Right, we'll carry on with that one. Pannier Market next. Over to Dwayne, please, for his report.
Good evening. Just want to first of all thank members for all their support. It's been a tricky time getting the reopening going, but most of you have been down and had a look at what we've done, and we're very pleased to be open again and up and running in our second week, just moving into the third week. So I've put my report together and added some recommendations for members around the charging strategy at the moment, and then the review periods. So I open up for comment.
Thank you very much for that. And I must say, first of all, on behalf of all of us, that we really do thank the work that's been done to get the pannier market and everything else in town up and running so well. It's a credit to everybody involved. So well done to everybody. Thank you. Town Clerk, please.
Just really, if I may take the opportunity, Chairman, the reason why we've put both of these reports from the Reeve and the Town Hall Events Manager on the agenda are to give you a sense of the current feel for what the potential impact on commercial income streams in their two areas of activity are. These are very much projections. They're very much best guesses at this stage. But in particular, I think what we wanted you to be able to do was to start to think about, having looked at the capital side of things, where commercial income could potentially be, or not, as the case might be. So looking at the reductions by virtue of social distancing, the reduced number of days opening, the changed pricing structure for the pannier market, those sorts of things, so that effectively at the end of this meeting, you've got a sense of where your revenue streams are, and then the next piece of work that takes place is going to be very much about linking them into the savings and the service potential cuts that we were talking about earlier. So that's really the reason why both of these are here, to give you a sense of that. I've got nothing to add to either individuals.
Thank you. Shall we just hear from Becky first, and then we can talk to everybody, please? That might be useful.
Thank you. I too would just like to thank councillors for all their support over the last few months, in particular the work we've been trying to do with keeping the Works Department engaged in the community and what have you. So thank you ever so much for all of your support. You've got my report there. As you can see, the recommendation I have made in regards to the Town Hall is delegation be put to management in regards to how we progress with the Town Hall, and the reasons being in the report.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, comments please from anybody. Councillor Amanda Ewings, please.
I have a question for the Market Reeve, please. On page 1 of his report, on his 4th bullet point, during this initial first phase, the intention is to allow free rent for a period of 2 weeks. He's got this charge will also be applied to the lock-up units and invoiced accordingly. Does that mean that this applies to Bob's Cafe as well?
I think that's probably a question for me.
Oh, okay.
I would rather not go into the details during the public session, but I'm very happy to have a conversation in the confidential session with regard to any particular individual business, if that's agreeable to you, Chairman.
Yes, absolutely.
And yes, and I had another one highlighted, but they're a bit. If you take questions from others, I'll find the other one.
Okay, thank you. Comments from anybody else? Yes, Councillor Squire, please.
I'd just like to say that at the consultation meeting for the market traders and business aspect, which was held yesterday, there was a general air of resigned competence to continue. Arguably, there were some traders, cafes included, who were suffering probably more than others, but the overall meeting was surprisingly positive considering the difficulties that they've been under. So this is a commendation to the Reeve and the general management for the way they've conducted the affairs over the past few weeks. That came through clearly. Thank you.
Yes, it did, very much so. It was very good last night, wasn't it? Any other comments, thoughts? Yes, Councillor Ewing.
Yes, thank you. I've just found the other one. The Town Hall is to be used as welfare facilities for staff. Which departments does that cover, or is it all staff?
That's just the market and event staff. The Works Department have been using the Molly Owen Centre, and the 2 officers that continue to work twice a week in the council offices use the welfare facilities in the council offices.
Thank you, Becky.
No other comments? Right, shall we move that forward to council then? Okay, thank you. Bedford Square Trading and Farmers Market. To the market reel again, please.
Can I just say on that one, I think that the general manager probably has an update in relation to that one from the conversation I had with him earlier. He might want to pick that up.
Yes, Wayne, please.
Following on from the report and some email correspondence that some of you would have received as well from the farmers market, we've been in discussions with them today before this meeting. I've had a discussion direct with the chairman. We've agreed in principle starting on August the 8th, so the second farmers market in August, no apologies, August the 22nd, that we will actually apply a fee of £250, but we will be erecting all the marquees and dismantling all the marquees on Bedford Square. So this achieves the principles of still making the farmers market financially viable, because they needed to spend that kind of money by outsourcing it for installing their own marquees from an independent organisation, and we are actually generating an income in these challenging times. So it's a balance that in principle has been agreed, and the chairman of the farmers market is just going to take to his committee for sign off.
Very good, thank you for that. Any other comments on Councillor Ewings, please?
May I just inquire, so they wouldn't be using the trailer and marquees that they have anymore, which they say they bought. Are we erecting their marquees, or are we using all of our own?
Using our own.
Okay. And it's £250 per market. Mr. General Manager?
Sorry, I said yes. Yes.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see or hear that. Yeah.
Any other comments? Councillor Crawford, please.
Yeah, having read the correspondence from the chair people, I was a bit concerned about any ill will. They didn't seem to be very willing to sort of give very much, and I was just concerned about how we might actually sort of pull that back. So well done on doing that, but just want to make sure that there is no ill will, because I think the market is quite an attraction, really, isn't it?
In simple terms, I'm sure the farmers market would want to continue with the arrangements they had historically. At the end of the day, you've just had the scene set in relation to where we are with regards to our council finances. And if the farmers market continues on Bedford Square in its previous setup, then we will receive no income on any of the days that the farmers market operates. So it's trying to get a balance which works for them, but also works for the council, to ensure that where we can't actually generate an income on primary days for trading, especially with the recognition that we're actually operating on a vastly reduced footprint within the pannier market, and as traders begin to get reassured, they are going to want the opportunity to be able to trade on different days. More traders are going to want to come back. If we can't actually achieve that, we need to ensure that we can actually get an income in other ways in relation to a farmers market, and then we're actually looking at the utilisation of Butchers Hall for trying to accommodate those traders that want to return.
Good.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other comments on this? Councillor Ewings again, please.
Does that mean now that we are only accepting our own traders, in inverted commas, to be able to go onto Bedford Square and some of the perimeter of the market, or are we going to start accepting bookings from other organisations to use the square.
You want to come in on this at this stage, Becky?
I think that's a conversation that we now need to have in the next couple of days. Well, the general manager, myself, and the market read need to have. Up to now, we have offered the Meadows as an alternative to Haring Square, just because there is more space. We currently have one previous customer, event organizer, who is interested in using the Meadows as opposed to the Square, and also as opposed to using Butchers Hall. So we're just sort of finalising possible arrangements for that. But it's absolutely, it opens the door up to whether we can now have the Square available to other parties. I definitely don't think the perimeter is an option, just because of social distancing and the space for queues that we need to allow in and out of the perimeter shops and the pannier market. So I think the perimeter is taken off the table, if the other two managers don't mind me saying that. But definitely, I think it opens the door for what that means with the Square going forward.
Okay, thank you. Finally, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to just take the opportunity to thank Councillor Ellis and Councillor Mann for their excellent video that they did, that my 89-year-old lady loved. So it was really, really good. Thank you.
We heard yesterday that video has gone round the world. So very good. It's been heard in Saudi Arabia, advertising Tavistock. So well done. Any other comments? No, so that can go forward to council, then, please, and we'll move on to the next thing. Townscape Heritage Initiative Public Realm. General Manager again, please, to tell us where we are with the car park realm project.
I had a site meeting today with RM Builders in relation to my report. Nothing has changed.
Any comments from anybody? Councillor Johnson, please.
Thank you. Thank you to the General Manager for this report. He has obviously, as he does with everything he does, has worked incredibly hard to try and sort out the budget as far as this is concerned, and I'd like to express my thanks to him for all the efforts he's made on sorting that out. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Any other comments? Yes, we've got Councillor Ewing, then Councillor Harry Smith, please.
May I just ask the General Manager, I've had inquiries, Wayne, this week about bike rings, places for people to be able to put their bikes, that they feel that we need them more over the town, but we're going to be having more over by the telephone box side, if I'm right from memory, once the car park is done. Is that correct?
There are 3 bicycle racks within the project which are earmarked for by the side of the Guildhall toilets, but we have just installed one of the Devon County Council bicycle racks by the telephone box, which can accommodate up to 10 bikes.
Right. And with the 3 racks that you're talking about, how many bikes would that take?
One either side, so 6.
Pardon?
We didn't hear that, Wayne, sorry. Can you repeat that? I don't think...
One either side, so 6.
Right. Okay. Yeah, sorry, I'm just doing the maths in my head. So 3 racks, but they only hold 2 bikes each.
Right.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Harry Smith, please.
Yeah, having been involved in some of the meetings that have gone on so far, reference the work that's going on at the Guildhall and in the car park. When I heard the figures that are included in the report, I thought, well, it's going to be a really tough one now, considering all the value engineering we've done so far. It's a tough one to get down to manageable levels, but it appears that we've done that quite successfully. Just the environment from the property maintenance. Is that the property maintenance budget? Is that the one that's somewhere around 68,000 in the budget papers?
Yes.
Do you wish to say something else, Councillor Smith?
Well, my only point would be that with the current situation, it seems the logical thing to do is to take via the money from that budget across to get some work completed. I mean, in some ways, it would be disappointing that we are not able to at this stage to include the work around the toilets, because it seemed at the time when it was proposed that it was a really good way of enhancing that area, but needs must at the moment. So relatively happy to go with it as it is.
Thank you very much. Any other comments or thoughts on the Heritage Initiative? No, so we'll move that to council. Next one again is the General Manager, the Guildhall courtroom, please. It's you again, Wayne.
This is just to flag that members were probably aware previously that we were having challenges around how to approach the courtroom in regards to plaster. When we started taking off certain levels of plaster, we realised that it wasn't a 30 mil thick plaster, it was actually 90 mil, where over the years they had applied 5 layers just going on top each time, probably to hide previous issues and defects. That has impacted on costs, where originally we were looking at budgeting between 10 and 15k for the courtroom, and potentially it increased the cost to in the region of around 45,000, literally tripling the project cost for that element. This was something which was going to be looked at out of contingencies. Obviously, I'm sure you're aware of all the challenges we had historically with the contract, during the contract financially, around value engineering, and obviously the impacts we've had with regards to certain other additional elements which we found, like the old fireplace, which we had to negotiate with Historic England around how to approach that, which caused project delays, and also obviously the impacts in and around the suspension of the contract during COVID. We have now come up with a solution which will be amenable to the conservation officer, because it's a similar kind of finish that we've got in the magistrates room, that we also discussed with Historic England, which will be to the value of just over 30,000 to do the courtroom. This obviously does have a impact on our contingencies, where, as you're aware, we have currently got a Viridor application which is going in for the shop fit out. We have had a meeting with the steering group. It means that certain things clearly have had to be stripped out of the contract again, going through all the provisional sums, removing some bespoke items, i.e. AV, which can be dealt with independently as a separate grant application and can be added to at the end of the contract. It probably leaves us in a position now that committing to the 30,000, subject to us being successful or not in relation to the other grant application with regards to Viridor, that we are going to be in a position where we either have a 50,000 or a 30,000 contingency left on the contract, and that isn't dealing with any issues around potential loss or claims, etc., because of other things what I've described earlier. So it's going back to the scene setting that the town clerk did earlier. We are extremely tight within this contract. This is an element that absolutely we've all agreed has to go ahead in relation to the courtroom, because either way, if we don't do the right thing at this stage, we are just going to transfer liability either to THT or to the town council going forward around ongoing redecorations, etc., within what is the main flagship room within the Guildhall. So it's just to really set the scene of where we're at, which means that we are very, very thin on contingencies at this stage, but we will continue to endeavour to ensure we deliver the contract within budget, because we have to.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that. Any other thoughts, comments on this? Councillor Mann, please.
Yeah, just a question for the General Manager. On that Viridor grant that you've done, did you include the AV equipment in that grant, or was that without the AV equipment?
The Viridor grant is specific to the shop fit out, so a separate one would have to be done for the AV.
Okay.
Town Clerk, please.
Just by way of update, we are not now anticipating that the Viridor grant will be successful. We haven't had that confirmed, but it's looking highly unlikely, just so the members are aware.
Thank you. Councillor Parker, please.
Thank you, Chair. Wayne, a couple of months ago, we were exploring the possibility of Section 106 money that's in the district councils, but the borough council's budget. Was that anything come of that?
You may need to refresh me on that discussion.
No, the discussion was actually with Jerry and company, but we found that there is an unspent element of Section 106 money in the borough council's coffers, and certainly when we had an informal word with them, they thought it might be appropriate to be applied to either the lift or the AV. Was that never followed up?
It hasn't been followed up from my side, but I can check with THT and see where we're at with that.
I'll have a chat with you out of the meeting then, because I'm sure there's still some money there.
That certainly needs to be followed up, doesn't it? Certainly. Good. Councillor Harry Smith, please.
Just in response to Councillor Parker, I do seem to recall that during some of the discussions, the chairman of THT did indicate that some contact had been made with West Devon Borough Council with regard to that funding, but I'm not 100%. I'm not sure that we found out what the outcome was.
Right, it certainly needs to be followed up now, doesn't it? Okay, so that will go to council if there's nothing more to say. Should we go on to item 10, the annual audit? To the town clerk, please.
Thank you, Chairman. There's a covering report which sets out the officer responses to the points of your internal auditor. He is broadly satisfied with, as you'll know from his overall report, which you considered at council on the 1st of July, with the performance of the council. I think it's fair to say that we've been able to provide either a correction or indeed a clarification of the situation in relation to each one of the points he's raised, which are broadly speaking at the technical and operational level rather than major issues of concern. I think in the context of the year we've had, which has been a challenging one, is probably quite a positive report given the relatively minor nature of the issues which have been raised. So we're seeking any comments from members, but then to receive and endorse the report and the actions being taken.
Okay, thank you very much. Any comments, thoughts? Councillor Smith, please.
I just wish to move receipt and endorsement at this stage. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you
Chair.
very much. Do we have a seconder for that? Yes, Councillor Johnson, please. All in favour, please show. Okay, thank you very much. 11, Model Code of Conduct Local Government Association consultation. This is really, and you've all had a look at it. Are there any points that anybody wants to raise? The Town Clerk does. Yes, please, Town Clerk.
I think I mean, this is here as the report indicates, Mr. Chairman, because the current operating proposal, and it's not certain it's going to happen, but is that a model code of conduct be introduced for principal authorities, and if it is, that model code of conduct will also apply to town and parish councils within their area. Therefore, there are some elements of this which members may have an interest in. You can respond to the questionnaire, which is available online in an individual capacity. I guess from an officer perspective, there were 3 areas where we just wanted to ask you whether or not you wished the response to go back. Those areas are, firstly, whether or not you feel that either a separate code or a separate section within the code to address social media might be helpful. As a council, we've had some recent contact with social media issues, as members will be aware, and certainly social media is something which has grown dramatically over the last even 5 years in terms of its impact. The second element that sort of stands out there is in relation to the sanctions which are proposed. The Committee on Standards in Public Life proposed sanctions which included, if memory serves me right, up to 6 months suspension. You'll see that the most serious sanction here is 2 months suspension from something like being a member of or chairing a committee. Bear in mind that that would be for something as serious as bullying, harassment, victimisation, either of a councillor, a staff member, or indeed somebody else. So I think the question I would ask is whether or not as a council you feel that that is proportionate to the higher levels of incidents that could occur. And finally, there is reference to bringing the council into disrepute, but there's no actual definition of what bringing the council into disrepute actually means, and that leaves it quite wide. So I guess the question that we would just ask is whether or not you would be happy, and if not, I completely understand, with a response from the council indicating that the sanctions should better reflect those proposed by the Committee on Standards in Public Life, that there should be a separate section which relates to social media, and that there should be a definition in relation to bringing the council into disrepute. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Harry Smith, please, and then Councillor Graham Parker.
Yeah, I mean, I welcome this opportunity to comment on this consultation, because over the years, I think we've suffered a number of times about the inability to deal with behaviour of few individual councillors. In the review, I think it's chapter 2, which references codes of conduct. There are in there many points relative to an area which needs to be reviewed. And the paper states, and I quote, model codes available to local councils contain little detail on important areas such as social media use. The paper also states, our evidence suggests that the current narrow scope of codes of conduct make it difficult to effectively deal with some instances of poor behaviour, particularly in relation to social media use. So to help with the avoidance of doubt, the suggestion is that codes of conduct should be written in plain English and be about what is required of councillors rather than, as they currently are when you look at them, about aspirations. In my view, that the phrasing of requirements should be in the terms of councillors must, or in many cases, councillors must not do. They should not include phrases, as some of them do, such as councillors must be aware of. That doesn't actually mean anything. So in response to the Town Clerk's report, I fully support 2.7 A, B, and D, and I'm quite happy to respond on my as an individual. But I feel that the council, when you look at questions that are posed at the end of the document, question 1, I think, should be to a great extent. Question 3, we should use the passive tense. Question 4, to a great extent in all 12 sections. Question 6, each specific obligation followed by its relevant guidance. Question 10, no. Question 10A, separate code. As the codes currently stand, the variation, quality and clarity do not support good local government, and the production of an updated model would support the work of our sector. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. That's useful from a councillor who's obviously been around for a few years and has seen some of the problems that maybe some of us haven't. Councillor Parker wants to speak, and if people have a think in the meantime whether we think that we should ask Councillor Harry Smith to do this for us, or whether we need a little committee to think about it on behalf of everybody. But Councillor Parker first, please.
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to congratulate the town clerk, because this came up at the last DALC committee meeting that we both attended. And I think by the end of a very long meeting, we'd both made a note. We must take a report to committee on this. And neither of us could remember at the end of that meeting what this was. Well done for remembering. And those are the exact points that we agreed we'd bring forward. I mean, like Harry, I've been around local government now. Actually, I've been around local government for 55 years. And when I started, officer codes of conduct and member codes of conduct were very clear. You shall not do this, you shall do that. If you do this, the sanction is this. And it was clear what standards were expected of officers and members. As time's gone by, these codes of conduct have got more and more and more toothless. Until now, it's like Jeff Boycott used to say about being whipped with a piece of wet lettuce. I absolutely agree with Carl that we should, if we're going to stand up for standards in local government generally, there must be sanctions, real sanctions for bad behaviour, for bullying, for insulting, as Carl said, suspending somebody from 2 months from being the chair of a committee is no sanction at all. So I entirely agree with the point he raises about sanctions. The issue about disrepute, at one time we knew what disrepute meant. When I was in local government in the 1960s, you knew, and it was written into disciplinary codes. Now it means nothing. That does definitely need to be defined. And I don't think the Local Government Association have ever really got their head round the relationship between local government and social media. And even if the national code doesn't deal with it, I think we ought to look at ourselves and see whether there's anything we can do locally. I would just make one suggestion, bearing in mind that this came out of a meeting of DALC as well as NALC. Can we can I suggest that when you take your resolution that you agree to copy the results into DALC as well as NALC? But just generally, thank you to the town clerk for bringing this up.
Yes, Councillor Squire, please.
Isn't this a subject for the agenda item of full council? I would have thought it's worthy of a comprehensive consideration and agreement rather than particularly to the Budget and Policy Committee. So yeah, I recommend it goes forward.
Okay, thank you. That seems sensible to me. Does that seem to be the thing to do? Councillor Crawford, please.
Yeah, I'm just following on from Councillor Parker's comment about it having less teeth over the years. I see under recommendation 18 with that list, they talk about the criminal offence relating to disclosable pecuniary interests should be abolished. That doesn't provide any sanction for any difficult behaviour that might be going on in terms of finance. So, because that's a disclosable interest, isn't it? So I just wanted to clarify that, and that doesn't sit very comfortably with me, I have to say.
Okay. Town Clerk, please, wanted to comment.
I think in relation to the two previous points, in relation to disclosable pecuniary interests or DPIs, if my memory serves me right, I think in the first 3/4 years of the operation of the code, there was nationally, within the whole of England, only one prosecution brought for a conflict of interest, which failed to be disclosed. Now, when you consider that there are 10,000 councils across the country, that seems to me to either suggest that there is a massively high level of compliance within the sector, or it just doesn't work. And I think the practical reality, if you speak to anybody involved with the standards regime, is that it doesn't work from a practical perspective. I think picking up the point that Councillor Squire made, the reports come to this committee for detailed consideration. Council, of course, then has an opportunity through the minutes, if it wishes to amend those at the council meeting or to comment on them or vary them in any way by way of the resolution when the minute recommendation comes up. I'm assuming, and I'm looking at Councillor Smith as I say this, that he is moving both the combination of recommendations A, B and D, and then the points he raised in relation to questions 1, 3, 4, 6 and 10A as his as a recommendation for the purposes of going forward to Council.
That is correct, Mr. Chairman.
Right, so shall we do that? Do we have a seconder if Councillor Smith's proposal? Somebody second it? Yes, Councillor Johnson. Right, let's take that to Council then, please. Okay, thank you. Next, heritage interpretation. This is about after the discussions on Drake's statue, we considered the nominations of up to 3 councillors. Now, I know that Councillors Crawford, Ursula Mann and Winnipeg have been suggested as to be nominated about this. And I know Leslie would like to talk to the committee a little bit about something, how they want to go forward. So Leslie, can you just tell us about your chimp monkey, please?
I wish I could, but I might be easier to hand it over to Councillor Mann, actually, who knows much more about that. So do you want to talk about it, Ursula?
Right, sure. But basically we had a meeting, and I think you mean Survey Monkey is what you're...
I do.
And what we wanted to do was to make sure that we took into account not only the school population, which is what has already been done through the Tavistock Heritage Trust and the Rotary, having surveyed the local school children about Francis Drake's history, what they know, what they'd like to know, what they know about colonialism. But we wanted to open that up to the general population of Tavistock. And the method that we were proposing to do that with is a Survey Monkey, which would allow us to basically give people a way to tell us their opinions about how we're moving forward with the information board. It would be done in parallel with the work that's being done at the schools, and it would be basically giving that to the population of Tavistock as a method to communicate with us. It would be us as a committee that would be working with them and working with Tavistock Heritage Trust to collate that information and take on board what people have to say in that way. Now that we're working on the board itself, I felt, along with the other 2 committee members, that it was really important to make sure that the people of the town of Tavistock had a voice, and this was a good way to do that.
Would there be a cost to that, to the council?
There would be probably a one-off cost of about £90, which is what a Survey Monkey membership costs for 1 month. And would allow us to be able to collate, I think, up to 500 responses. I don't assume that we'll probably have a huge number, but if we did, it could increase the cost that you'd have to pay by a small amount, like up to about 150. I've done one with Tavistock Locals Help recently, and it's really good information, and you can use postcodes and email addresses in order to verify that people are actually located in the area.
Okay, thank you. Right, any thoughts on that, please, from anybody? It's basically a thought of whether we give approval to this, because there is a cost involved. Councillor Johnson, please. Anne, can you unmute yourself, please?
Sorry, I'm trying to hold down my space bar. There's a small cost involved in it, and I think we ought to go ahead with it, given that we've got people who are prepared to work on the project.
Okay, thank you. Is there a seconder for that? Yes, Councillor Harry Smith. Can we just have a show of hands and those in favour, please? Okay, those against? Okay, so that's carried then. So we'll agree to that, please, for those 3 councillors. Okay. Right. Reopening of the Pannier Market and Town Centre, and this is the General Manager, please.
Sorry, Chairman, just as we move off the previous one, my apologies. Yes. Is it possible for the committee to formally confirm by way of recommendation the nomination of the 3 councillors, Mrs. Mann, Ms. Crawford and Mrs. Parker, as that group? We did refer to them at the last meeting, but we did say we'd take them through the formal process. If you're happy just to add that to the recommendation.
Yes. Can we all recommend and agree to that, please? Please show. Yes, that's fine. Thank you, Town Clerk. So reopening the Pannier Market and Town Centre, and this is the General Manager, please.
In relation to reopening the Pannier Market, etc., I've got nothing else to probably add at this stage, which hasn't been covered off in relation to the market reviews and the town hall and events managers' reports from previously. In relation to Town Centre, as you're all aware, your officers have been supporting both BID and West Devon Borough Council in regards to the temporary arrangements which are currently within the High Street. We had an agreement in place where BID were going to leave the current restrictions in place and monitor it for a 2-week period from the 4th of July when other hospitality activities reopened to see how the town centre sort of like operated with those new sort of like activities reopening. We are looking at having a further review either this Friday or Monday with BID in relation to looking at the arrangements. Obviously, this is primarily a BID-led activity with West Devon Borough Council supporting and the Town Council feeding into it with regards to our expertise around certain aspects. And we will have like I said, a further meeting on Friday or Monday next week to talk about next steps.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Williamson, I think you've got your hand up.
Very quick, thank you. I'd just like to congratulate the General Manager and his team, the entire workforce of the Town Council that is engaged with the BID manager. She is single-handed and obviously is feeding in very regularly the very dynamic information that's coming from the people that are BID levy players. And the General Manager and his team have been very responsive. Obviously, there is a lead time to do things. They've actually got inside that in many ways. And I think it's the engagement, the level of engagement, similar to the work done on the markets reopening, has actually been very pleasing to hear as a director of the BID. So I, on behalf of the BID in this forum, want to just convey that information to the General Manager and his team.
Thank you very much. Any other thoughts at this time? No? Good. It has been going very well, so thank you to everybody. Public Works Loan Board, this is the Town Clerk, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to confirm that we anticipate the loan being drawn down and with us on Thursday of this week. I received confirmation today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Urgent items. I have no urgent items to bring forward. So I think that's the end of part 1. So if that's correct, Town Clerk, we can stop the streaming. We all will leave for a few minutes and then log back in on the numbers you've got, please, in your minutes. Okay, Town Clerk, so can we leave now, please? See you all in a few minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman. I will close the system now, and if we log back on in about 6 or 7 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much.